Welcome to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast. I am your host, Kaylee Greenacre, a business strategist, coach, TEDx speaker, author, and your go-to woman for all things business strategy. I am obsessed with supporting female entrepreneurs to grow unstoppable six and multi-six-figure businesses that they love, giving them the freedom and life that they desire. During this podcast, I'll be sharing with you everything that you need to become a successful female entrepreneur, from the mindset shifts to sales and marketing strategies and how to become an iconic leader that people can't get enough of. It is my mission to help you stand out, attract your dream clients and customers, and sell out of your offers with ease whilst building the business and life of your dreams. Let's make this your reality, ladies. Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Actually I Can, the Female Entrepreneur podcast. And I'm joined today by the fabulous Natalie Mackenzie, who is a cognitive therapist. And we are going to be diving into why cognitive health matters in business and how to protect your best business asset. Natalie, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I love talking all things brain, so I'm ready.
I'm very excited for this conversation, I must admit. And I'm sure our listeners are as well. But before we dive into the topic itself, I would love, if possible, for you to introduce yourself and to give our listeners a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, so I'm Natalie Mackenzie. I'm also known as the cognitive strategist or just the brain lady, depending on who I'm talking to. So my background is in psychology and cognitive neuropsychology. I run and have run, I mean, I've now realised today, the day before my birthday, for half my life, worked with people with traumatic brain injury. So that's my background as a cognitive rehabilitation therapist. But I also support business owners and entrepreneurs with their cognitive health, cognitive strategy and business strategy in order to harness their own cognitive profiles and understand what actually they need to be doing for brain health, both for their business, but for their long-term brain health too, well past retirement and into old age.
Amazing. Sounds fascinating and cannot wait to dive into this. So I think let's just start from the beginning here in regards to why is cognitive health so important and why is it a vital asset to us as female entrepreneurs?
Yeah. I mean, obviously working with people for 2 decades with brain injuries, I get to see how important cognitive function is and what happens when things go wrong. Because I think often people don't consider their cognitive health at all until A, either something happens, B, someone in their life gets something like Alzheimer's or dementia, or C, if they've had some sort of burnout or mental health issue that's led them to actually think about what's not working cognitively. And a lot of what's great now is in business, a lot of people are talking about health is wealth and how we need to have good mental health and nervous system regulation. But for me, it goes a lot deeper than that into just actually how the brain is functioning for each individual and how it's important for each individual to understand their own cognitive profile. Because we all understand that our bodies work in a particular way. We have strengths and weaknesses. Our left arm might be weaker than our right arm, but it's the same with cognitive and brain function as well. We have our own cognitive profile that we need to understand in order to be able to harness our strengths, understand our weaknesses and what we're not so good at, to be ordered to actually put those into our business, into a strategy, and get the best out of ourselves, as well as looking after our physical and mental health.
Absolutely. So important to have that balance and make sure that we're prioritizing, should I say, all aspects of our health. And absolutely, I think I completely agree. You know, a lot of people are saying health is wealth and all of these things. And it's so important for us as female entrepreneurs to be healthy, but obviously to be healthy in all aspects of our life, our cognitive health, etc. So for our listeners who are female entrepreneurs, are there any piece of advice that you could really give them in regards to protecting or boosting their cognitive health then whilst managing, let's say, you know, lots of the demands of business and life and trying to juggle all of these things?
I think firstly, people need to understand what cognitive health is. People might not actually know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Because I think people think, oh, brain health, mental health, it's all the same thing. But actually, when I talk about cognition, it's truly about the way that our brains think, make decisions, learn, behave. But then even deeper, it's your attention, your working memory, visual processing, spatial awareness, social cognition, actually understanding what you're doing every day, how it relates to cognition. That's my first thing. So I teach people, we do cognitive health assessments to actually show them what their cognitive profile looks like, what their working memory is like, what their attention is like, because you can't start to put strategies into place and do anything until you're actually understanding what you're working with.
Absolutely.
And understanding as well that lots of things affect your cognition. So cognition is kind of like more like blood pressure than it is kind of height in terms of how it changes, and understanding how your cognitive profile and cognitive function changes even on a day-to-day basis, monthly basis, or as we age. So first things first, you need to learn about it.
Yeah.
You need to know what it is. And I think that's a lot of the work that I do when I talk about cognition. Well, what do you mean? What is cognition? What is going on inside there at a much more kind of functional level? So first things first, let's learn about it. If you don't want to get things like cognitive health assessments, people need to be thinking about looking at what their patterns of behavior are, not just in terms of mood and mental health, but actually tracking when they're finding that their attention is waning. Are they in meetings or busy environments and they can't pay attention? Are they having problems with their memory? Are they finding that decision making is difficult? And actually tracking that when it's happening, what environments it's in, what's happening in their life, what are they doing, how they're planning their days, all of those sorts of things as a starting point.
So understanding ultimately what it is, what's going on, and I know that you are someone that people can reach out to and to come and get some support and help with that, and then starting to really look at or understand what they're doing, how they're doing, what decisions they're making, what they're doing on a daily basis. Are there any signs that potentially I hear this word, it's really interesting because I hear this kind of phrase that, brain fog as well. That's something that sort of comes up. What does that mean? Let's dive into this more. What does brain fog?
It's become such a buzzword, and I hate saying buzzword, because brain fog is a real thing, but it basically is a sign that things are overwhelmed. Things are not working as they should be. But I'm not sure people really understand what brain fog is, because I think women talk about it, often when they're pregnant, baby brain.
Yes.
And feeling foggy and brain fog. We hear it a lot more women. I don't think we hear a lot of men talking about brain fog, if I'm honest. And it is actually a thing. So if we go to like the baby brain side of things, and I know hormones that will come up, but it is actually a thing where your brain changes. The volume of your brain reduces because, evolutionary speaking, you need to be focusing on growing a baby and rearing a child. So all those higher level functions go. So those higher level, what we call prefrontal behaviors, planning, organization, executive functioning, decision making, not being impulsive, they kind of go offline for a while because they're not needed, because the brain's function is looking at survival of your new what's it called, your new sproglet, whatever you want to call it. So but the same happens when people are cognitively overloaded and overwhelmed, when their cognitive function is not optimal. What happens is those prefrontal behaviors literally kind of start to fail and go offline. And that's where that fogginess comes in. It's literally the brain trying to figure out how to utilize the higher level functions that make us human, that have evolved, that literally our brain is the shape that it is because we need prefrontal behaviors to function in a busy world. But when it's overwhelmed, when there's too many processes working simultaneously, when there's too much stress, when there's poor levels of nutrition, when there's low levels of sleep, when there's poor levels of outside light, the brain is in a fog. And that is a sign that things aren't working right. And again, I think people are very much now into physical health and wellness, which is brilliant. I was looking up this morning, just out of interest, about in the US, 33%, and in the UK, 20% of people are wearing wearable health trackers.
Interesting.
Which is actually really high. It doesn't sound very high, but if you think about the age ranges of people that wear them, it actually means that the population of people, probably a lot of the listeners, are in a population that are worried about or concerned or wanting to look after their health, but they're not, then they're understanding more about that, how their body feels, but not paying attention to this fogginess or how their brain feels. And you can tangibly know that your body is flat when it's physically flat, when you can't get up or you can't find the energy, but actually understanding that the same's happening in your brain and what it looks like. But the problem is that people push through brain fog, which is literally like pushing proverbial up a hill, cognitively speaking.
Yeah.
Not going to work.
Such a good comparison as well, just to kind of think of it from that perspective. You're so right. I think there's so much emphasis, and so many people do focus on the physical health and, you know, what they're consuming in terms of food and going to the gym or active. But yeah, such a good question. Do our listeners really focus on their cognitive health? Are they considering that? Do they understand it? Such a valuable point there. So with cognitive overload then, and with this kind of brain fog, I know it's the buzzword, what are some of the early signs that people can look out for? I know we've kind of dived into like the brain fog concept of exactly what it is, but are there any early signs that people can kind of either identify or should be watching out for?
Yeah, so I think first things first, if you're getting to the point of feeling that there's brain fog, we're a bit late. A bit like when you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So this is where it comes back to what I was saying earlier. People need to pay attention to their patterns of behavior and what's happening on a day-to-day basis. So things like finding that you're having issues with your short-term memory, say, you're forgetting small things. Now, often people come to me, particularly slightly later in life, and say, my memory's going. Often the memory's not the problem, it's the attentional processes. So when I say attentional process, I don't mean things like ADHD. I do a lot of work with business owners with ADHD as well, but that's kind of I'm talking separate to that. So your attentional processes of being able to focus, being able to attend to words that are being spoken and information that is being given. When you're cognitively overloaded, if we think of a triangle of cognition, attention is right at the bottom. It's the basis of everything. If we can't attend to things, we can't process them, we can't encode them, put them into our memories, let alone retrieve them. So often one of the first signs will be that you feel that your memory's going, but actually it's gone even further before that. It's the attentional processes. And people might notice it. Often I say, keep an eye out kind of later in the day. So around kind of between 3 and 4, we have a natural dip in cortisol levels, which impacts our learning and memory, which is why schools finish when they do.
Yeah.
This is what, and you'll know, you've worked with children, you try and teach them past then it's game over. We're no different. So looking at kind of what patterns in the day, are you finding that your attention is waning later in the day? Are you doing back-to-back meetings and realizing by meeting 3, I am shot. I can't make any decisions, And as well, I think often, and we don't listen to this enough, we can get a lot of information from people who work around us or who are around us, who will notice things. So if you have a team, actually speaking to people saying, have you noticed anything? Actually seeking the information from other people, because often, and this often happens later in life when people are starting to get early signs of dementia, it will be somebody else that notices before.
Yeah.
Be somebody else that becomes concerned about it, because we're not looking inwardly all the time. We all know that, but it's little things like that. If you're finding you're waking up consistently foggy and tired, if you're waking up always low on energy, we know that you're therefore having impact on your sleep, and we know that poor sleep impacts reasoning and verbal ability. There's loads of research about that. But the problem is once you're cognitively overloaded and you've noticed all these things are starting to happen, your sleep starts to be impacted anyway. And we start going on quite a poor cognitive function cycle. So sleep, missing small pieces of information, feeling that your attention's waning, thinking that you've got issues with your memory are all your kind of early signs that things are starting to slip.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And do you know what? I can absolutely resonate with some of the things that you were saying there in regards to time of day, just sort of really obvious early signs. I am very much, I remember when I used to work in education, all of my listeners know I used to be a teacher. And I used to dread teaching period 5. I used to hate it. The 2 o'clock to the 3 o'clock slog of the day, especially on a Friday afternoon. I was like, whenever the timetable came out, I used to pray that I was not having to teach period 5 on most days, because I'm very much like a 6 a.m. I'm up, I'm raring to go, I'm on it. And by sort of 2 p.m. I need to pause, I need to stop. And it's fascinating that you sort of, you're explaining this, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's definitely me. But I suppose it's the majority, right? And I know that, I mean, how does this then compare to people, when people say that they're night owls, is there any explanation around cognitive health with this? Like, my partner, for example, he's more of a night owl. He will focus and be able to do a lot more work in the evening, whereas I'm like a 6 a.m.er. Is there any science behind that at all?
Oh, there's so much science. So I love the sleep stuff. So I've done lots of training in sleep as well. So I treat people with insomnia as well. So you're either a night owl, so you have your own kind of like circadian profile, your circadian rhythm profile. And if anyone out there's got the new wearable rings, it actually tells you on there what you are. Yeah, me too. So you will be either a lark, which you are, or an owl. So it means that your circadian rhythm works on early mornings or late nights. I'm an owl massively. And an interesting fact, well, I think it's interesting, you tend to mate with the opposite one.
Interesting.
You tend to, evolutionary speaking, be attracted to the opposite circadian pattern than yourself, because round the clock, evolutionary speaking, people had to keep chicks alive.
Yeah.
But it's a really important thing to understand how your circadian rhythm works for optimal function. So we work on a 90-minute circadian rhythm, right? And I kid you not, your cognitive function wanes at the same. So you may find that you can pay attention for a certain amount of time, but 45 minutes in, you're at optimal. And then after that, you start to wane in your attention. And this is the way that we sleep as well. So even when people are planning things, I actually drill down into looking at people's 90-minute rhythms and say people shouldn't be starting big tasks in a circadian dip. So there's that. Then we've got the owl and the lark. I work late in the evening, which as I've got older isn't great for my sleep, because it's then pushing my sleep later, but I have to get up to take the kids to school. So my natural behavior doesn't suit my business life, but it's when my brain functions better. But a lot of people try and shoehorn a non-natural behavior into their natural circadian rhythm, and that's when they find that they're not very productive. So your circadian rhythm very much impacts productivity, and I bet you get loads done in the morning.
Absolutely loads. Yeah. I am so proactive. Like, I honestly, I don't know how my brain actually does function, but I'm literally up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, I'm raring to go. I've done my workout, I've had my shower, and I'm ready. And it's some people do look at me. I think even my daughter looks at me and thinks I'm a bit crazy. But yes, I'm full of energy in the morning.
You therefore understand when your brain is at its optimal function, and you would naturally, I would hope, think, don't start anything big past kind of 4 o'clock. Don't make any big decisions. That's the other thing. Don't make any big decisions when you should be in rest and recharge, because that's what the circadian rhythm's all about. It's about activity, rest, activity, rest. That's what it needs to do. Our cycles need to do that. And I think people in today's society, we're running all the time, late, loads of decisions all the time. And certainly with a lot of people I work with, they get decision fatigue, because if you're working in business and you're having to make pretty big decisions all the time, but also quite small decisions, and if you've got a team, be responsible for other people's lives and their decisions, we get to a point where decision fatigue hits in, coupled with brain fog potentially, which then hits confidence, which then impacts decision making next time, and we end up on quite another poor cognitive function cycle.
It really is fascinating. I'm just thinking, for female entrepreneurs, or for any entrepreneur, in fact, exactly what you've just said. We're often pushing ourselves. There's big decisions to make quite often, especially if you've got teams and you're delegating also. But is there what advice could you give then our listeners? So if they are literally pushing through they might even be working a job and building a business at the same time. I know there are a number of our listeners that are doing that. And I remember that was me a number of years ago, and I was exhausted. I was working, I can't even describe, I can't go into the depth of how much I was working and how exhausted I was. And I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And I felt awful, absolutely awful. But I know there will be other people currently in that situation right now. What advice, other than sleep and rest, but what advice can you give them for this?
Yeah. I mean, I get it as well. I run 3 businesses, and if I didn't practice what I preach, I mean, I would be I'd just be rocking in the corner most of the day because it's hard. But I think it is the small things, and I won't say it's the simple things. It's like anything, it's the small things that make a difference. So yeah, sleep is obviously one. And the thing is, sleep isn't just sleep, it has to be quality sleep, right? And it has to be the right sleep for you. So that goes back to the circadian rhythm. So that's one obvious one. We need to be getting outside, physically outside and moving. And again, that's a really obvious one, and it's a small one. But for me, even if people can't get outside, stick your head out of the window, get sunlight to your eyeballs, which
Yeah.
actually stimulates your brain to produce melatonin, which enables you to sleep properly. So that's one thing. People get outside and they put sunglasses on. Stop it.
That's me. I didn't
But
know that fact at
it is,
all.
yeah, it is. And also, again, see, I am the brain lady. I'm such a brain geek. It's the reason why we often burn as English people when we go abroad is because we go outside on holiday with sunglasses on all the time, which has impacted our melatonin production for our skin as well. So there's a fact for people. But in terms of actually, again, simple things, I encourage people, and I do it myself now. Comes back to kind of what I said earlier about knowing when you're at optimal.
Mm.
I limit the amount of big decisions I make per day, practically speaking. And sometimes people say that's not possible because I've got loads of decisions to make. You can. I promise you can. If you actually think about and write down the things that you need to be making decisions about and plan ahead, don't be reactionary. Plan ahead about strategize what's coming. Look at what you've got ahead of you, and actually each day do not, I say 3. Now, it might sound a lot. Who on earth makes 3 big decisions in a day? But you do. Everything that you do is kind of some sort of decision making, but limit it. That's one of the biggest things you can do. And it sounds easy,
Mm.
but like anything, like physical health, you do have to work at your cognitive health as well. So limiting decisions, looking at the sleep, understanding your profile, and listening to what your body and brain is telling you. And often your body will tell you first, often. But yeah, that getting outside as well, and nutrition. And I know people have spoken to you about that before, but it does have a big impact. Don't be skipping meals as an entrepreneur. I know you're a snacker, which we know is fine.
Yeah.
We've heard that's fine, but it's what you're putting in. And also just planning and organization and pacing is so important. And this is one of the biggest things that I've learned working with people with brain injury. If you don't plan, pace, and prioritize, you are not going to achieve anything. And it's exactly the same with our brains. If people aren't actually sitting down and planning and pacing and prioritizing their day, they're already on the back foot. And that includes prioritizing rest, recharge, and optimally, if you can, learning. I say my mantra, I have to learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Your brain functions better when you are learning.
Absolutely. I I completely agree with that last point. Absolutely. In regards to learning every day, I love learning. I absolutely love to learn something new, and I can fully appreciate and understand the benefits of that. And I think with, what you said in regards to prioritizing, planning, making sure you're actually planning and mapping out rest, nutritional eating, actually having a break, getting outside, all of these things. I think, again, it's so, so important. And I can pretty much guarantee there will be people listening to this podcast right now who are not doing that. And it's, I was that person as well, like I said, a number of years ago. But I think it's so, so important. I completely appreciate everything you've said and the advice that you're giving. So anyone listening that's sat there and thinking you need to make your business work and you're doing everything that you can and you're overworking, you're working 12 to 14 hours a day, think about the advice that Natalie has given and really, how are you planning? How are you prioritizing? I know I've said this a number of times on different podcast episodes and my clients know this, but I am quite OCD when it comes to my planning. And every day I've got my daily diary, and every day I write everything in it, and I tick them off, and I make sure, although today is a very busy day, but I make sure there are breaks, there are rest times. I get out, I walk, I have some fresh air, all of those things. But I do recognize that a couple of years ago I was not doing that, and I was massively over stressed. I was drinking Diet Coke all day long. I was not in a good mental position for my health, but also my physical. So I think it is really important. And, I've had a massive, lesson to learn from that. But there's some incredible advice that you've given here. And ultimately, for those that are busy, prioritize, think about those decisions, making just sort of 1 to even 3, but 1 main decision every day, but 3 if necessary, and really kind of leaning into what is important, what needs to be done today, and then planning out the rest of the week. There's something else that I'd love to dive into, and it's hormones, because hormones is a big thing, is a huge thing.
Huge.
And I know we could probably talk about this for hours, but I just want to touch on it very briefly. How do hormonal changes affect our cognitive health or performance as well as entrepreneurs or as women? Because I know this is going to be a big thing and something that probably some of our listeners are wondering.
It's massive. And sadly, it's only been probably the last 2-3 years that people are really talking about it, and specialists or anyone, doctors, are actually recognizing it properly and how it functions, how it's impacting our function. And like I said, I alluded to earlier, we know about the baby brain, and but everyone just kind of jokes about that, kind of says, oh, you've got a bit of baby brain, blah blah blah. But as I said earlier, it's actually a thing. So like when we go through hormonal shifts, so specifically things like perimenopause, menopause, we do have big shifts in estrogen levels, which impact the neurotransmitters that are released in our bodies, which impact cognition, specifically attention and learning. So when I was saying earlier about, thinking that you've got memory issues when actually it's an attentional process issue, already that foundational part of cognition is being impacted by a shift in hormones. Then you add on with things like perimenopause and menopause, and there's some early research about actually during our periods anyway, it actually changes the volume of our brain. It reduces it. And there's a piece of research out that, for instance, in pregnancy, our brain reduces in volume by 18%, which is massive.
Huge.
It's huge. I mean, if we could talk productively and you said, I can increase your productivity by 20%, people would be like, oh, yeah. No, now we're going to reduce your brain capacity by 20%. It's absolutely bonkers. And so the fact that it's not even really spoken about just blows my mind. But that change in the volume impacts that prefrontal cortex more than anything. That's where it tends to happen. And that's where the executive functioning, decision-making, problem solving, planning, organization, all of that comes in. So we've got actual changes happening to our brain. Anyway, you've then got, if you think that you've then got issues with your learning and your attention, that also means that you're having changes to the way that your cognitive processes are working. So we always say in kind of neuro, use it or lose it. If you're not actually using your cognitive processes, and I'm not going to get started on tech and how it impacts our cognitive process, that's a whole other one. But if we're not using it or it's being impacted by something, it does impact how efficiently it works. So we've got that as your kind of particular time of life. Then we talk about the monthly changes. There's those shifts all the time. Now, I will put my hand, I am massively impacted cognitively during my cycles, and I notice it massively, and I've noticed it more. I'm of a certain age now where obviously I'm in perimenopause, and my brain fog was bad. And doing what I do, should know better in many ways, but it's kind of like those, again, you don't know what you don't know often. But even monthly, you will have changes to your hormones that impact your cognitive function. So it goes back to what I said right in the beginning. You need to track that. Everyone's got an app now tracking in their cycles, but even down to realizing that even during ovulation, there's a shift in your progesterone and estrogen, which impacts your cognitive function. Don't go making any big decisions when you're ovulating. It's probably not a good idea unless you've really thought it through. You tend to be more impulsive with things like that and more emotionally led, which is fine. Those that are more kind of gut driven and emotionally driven, absolutely fine. I don't have an issue with that. I'm a big believer in that. But pay attention to the shifts in your hormones. Listen to them and notice as you're getting older. And we now know, and people are more accepting of it. You need to be thinking about this much earlier than, people think, oh, it's kind of 50. That's when you need to be thinking. But we know, again, changes in hormones can happen 10 years before the menopause.
Yeah.
And people, again, that they're tracking their cycles, but they're not really tracking their cognition with it. So I actually, as we were saying with our rings, I actually track on my tags now. So obviously it tracks your cycle with your temperatures and everything, but I actually tag my cognitive function if I'm feeling more tired or more fatigued. I think most people with their hormones just think they're tired and grumpy, maybe a bit more emotional, but it goes much deeper than that. It's having a big impact on your cognitive function.
It's fascinating. Do you know what? It's really interesting saying about, again, being aware of your cycle, because many of us are, but actually, are we aware of, again, the decisions that we're making, how we're actually functioning during those specific times or, of our cycle? Wow, food for thought. And I know there's so much that we could dive into with hormones, but I think it's great and it's fascinating to get your expertise on this as the topic. We're coming to the end of the episode, Natalie, and I just want to say, first of all, thank you. It's been absolutely incredible to dive into this topic. What is your final piece of advice or a key takeaway for our listeners today?
Just start to turn inwardly towards understanding cognition. Actually, now that you've heard about it, try and understand a bit more about what cognition means. Try and think about how that you can put it into your own business strategy and make it a daily priority. But also, because it's not just about now, people are much more worried now about dementia, about not being, our brain as business people is our biggest asset. It really is. Like we'll all get along fine if something happens to us physically, but our brain is our biggest asset, and we need to understand how it works now. We need to monitor it. We need to have baselines so that we can look at how it's changing as we're getting older, and we need to look after our brain health in order to make these big decisions, to run our businesses, but also to have a nice retirement and not worry about losing our marbles as it's still called. And there's lots we can be doing to maintain our brain health well into old age. And the biggest thing is, please just go and learn something. And I know you love to learn, and your listeners must do, because they're coming on to learn. But you've got to realize actually how it's benefiting you. It's not a nice to have. It's absolutely an essential thing. And if you can learn with people and communities and speak to people, do that. And I know I'm only a really loud one takeaway. Do things that you find uncomfortable, because actually that is better for your brain now and for you long term than doing the same thing that you find comfort in all the time. The more you do that you find hard, the harder the brain has to work, and the more neuroplasticity happens.
Incredible. Honestly, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and diving into this incredible topic. And I'm sure there's some real key takeaways that people will have from this episode and can start to implement, or at least to consider and to think about around them, their business, their obviously cognitive health, and what they can do moving forwards. Natalie, where can everyone find you and connect with you?
They can find me on Insta. That's where I normally hang out, as the Cognitive Strategist, or at thecognitive strategist.com.
Amazing. All of the links where to find Natalie and her bio are in the show notes. Go and give her a follow, say hello to her, connect with her. She is incredible at what she does. And I just want to thank you again for coming on to today's episode.
Thank you. Any excuse to talk brains.
Thank you to everyone that's tuned into today's episode. Please don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. And I'll see you all again next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast with me, your host, Kaylee Greenacre. If you are ready to build, grow and scale your dream six-figure or multi-six-figure business, then head to our website now for more information or connect with me on socials to see how you can create your dream business and dream life.